find out more about the OPB Cornerstone Society, please visit opb.org/cornerstone or call Julie Arnzen at 503-977-7765.
Safe Corporation, helping make Oregon a safer place to work for all Oregonians. Online at safe.com.
Willamette University MBA in Salem and Portland, helping to empower managers and developing executives, now accepting applications online.
Good evening, I'm Judy Woodruff. On the NewsHour this Friday, the lead story, the hostage standoff on the Somali coastline. The rest of the day's news, President Obama meets with his economic team, and Margaret Warner takes stock of where we stand. Paul Salmon asks, can taxpayers recoup some of those big bonuses awarded to Wall Street executives? The analysis of Mark Shields and Rich Lowry substituting for David Brooks. And a Jeffrey Brown story about hard times for the arts community in Dayton, Ohio.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by...
Wow, that's it?
It's got purples and greens.
It looks very complicated.
It looks like a little solar panel.
This is what makes my computer tick, this little thing.
This really allows me to connect with my family in Beijing.
I couldn't teach my class without this.
This is the thing that lets me make movies.
Well, I think that's pretty fantastic that this little thing makes so much possible.
The world is changing, and how we use energy today cannot be how we use it tomorrow. There is no one solution. It's not simply more oil, more renewables, or being more efficient. It's all of it. Our way of life depends on developing all forms of energy and to use less of it. It's time to put our differences aside. Will you be part of the solution? Chevron, human energy.
Grant Thornton.
And the National Science Foundation, supporting education and research across all fields of science and engineering.
And with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
this program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Our lead story, there was more drama on the high seas off Africa today in a series of hostage standoffs with Somali pirates. American Captain Richard Phillips tried to escape his captors but was recaptured as U.S. defense officials watched from a nearby destroyer. Officials told the Associated Press the USS Boxer, the flagship for a multi-nation anti-piracy task force, will be nearby soon. And there were reports that the pirates asked for backup from other hijacked ships in the region. The French Navy rescued 4 hostages on a yacht, but one was killed in the operation. And a Norwegian ship was released after pirates were paid a ransom. Ray Suarez talked to Jeffrey Gettleman of the New York Times earlier today via satellite phone from East Africa.
Jeffrey, what do we know at this hour about the attempted escape of the captain of the Maersk Alabama?
The details are very fuzzy, but what we've been told is the captain jumped overboard, tried to swim to a nearby naval ship, and then the pirates jumped in after him and dragged him back to the lifeboat. And I just saw a report in the last few minutes that said that a U.S. aircraft had flown over the lifeboat and that the captain was in it and appeared to be okay.
Have the pirates holding the captain made a formal ransom demand?
We don't really know. There have been some reports that somebody from a town called Haradere, which is on the Somalia coast and is known as a notorious pirate den, that somebody from there had said they want $2 million to free the captain. But there are other reports that I've been hearing that this incident may not even be connected to the pirates in Haradere. It may be another group of pirates farther up the coast. So it's not really clear who's holding the captain and what they want.
Once you get to the point where you're talking about ransom and terms for release, I guess you have to know what your adversary is capable of. Have pirates killed hostages in the past?
There have been very few cases where pirates have harmed hostages. This is all about the money. And I've interviewed a number of pirates, and they've told me that straightforwardly. They said, this isn't about politics. This isn't about religion. This isn't about any beef that we have with anybody out there. This is about money. This is a way to earn income in a state where the economy is in complete tatters.
Just today, we have two competing examples of how takeovers end. The French released word they stormed a vessel that had been taken off the East African coast, killed some of the pirates, lost one of their own nationals who had been held on board. And then comes a story from Norway that the Norwegian freighter MT Boa Seer was freed after paying a ransom. Once a government gets involved, is there a different approach to this from when it's just the pirates and the shipping company?
Well, the French have taken the hardest line on the pirates, and they've organized a number of sting operations and assaults on ships that the pirates have been holding. They've been successful in most cases. They've surprised the pirates. I even heard some stories from sources of mine that they used submersible boats to go underneath these ships in captivity and then pop up with these French commandos and take the pirates totally by surprise and kill a couple of them, arrest a couple, and free the crews. So the French really are not playing around with this at all. Most other countries are reluctant to go down that road.
You've mentioned that you've talked to either pirates or people who are connected to them. Are they a network? Are there cells that are essentially freelance operations or independent gangs? Is there some sort of overall intelligence running these operations?
It's very murky. I think it's a mix. I think there are some people who are freelance opportunists, who were fishermen that decided they could make a lot more money by grabbing a machine gun and putting down their fishing rod. But there are other pirates that are part of a wider criminal network with financiers in different places as far away as London, the Arab world, Kenya. So it's a mix. I mean, from what I understand, is there are business interests that are fronting money for the pirates to buy weapons and equipment like GPS systems and boats and engines, and they give them this money to go take ships, and then once the ship is taken, then these businessmen get involved through these mediators, and then the mediators come up with a settlement, and then it's shared by all the parties. So there are some deeply vested criminal interests in this. And that's how Somalia has worked. That's warlord culture 101, is that you would have, gunmen on the street and teenage kids with AK-47s and, technicals, that Somali invention of a pickup truck with big guns riveted on the back. That's just what you see on the surface. But behind that are pretty sophisticated, pretty intelligent people that have figured out a way to exploit the anarchic system to make money, and make a lot of money.
Over the last several days, the capture of the Maersk Alabama has certainly captured America's attention. But right now, are there many other ongoing hostage or ship capture situations involving other countries still waiting to be settled?
There are. There are more than a dozen ships right now that are being held by pirates, with something like 250 to 300 crew members being held hostage. And I talked to one shipping expert in London, and he said, this is crazy. Nowhere else in the world would you allow this to happen. He said that you could see on Google Earth images of these ships anchored off the coast of Somalia that are being held by these pirates. People know exactly where they are. They know who's holding them, but it continues.
Jeffrey, thanks a lot.
No problem. Glad to help.
In other news today, 5 American soldiers were killed in Iraq in the deadliest single attack in more than a year on U.S. forces. The suicide truck bombing happened in the northern city of Mosul, near the National Police headquarters. 2 Iraqi policemen also died in the attack, and 18 others were wounded. In Afghanistan, clashes between U.S.-led forces and the Taliban left 27 insurgents dead. The U.S.-led coalition reported that today. The fighting centered on Helmand and Uruzgan provinces, where the Taliban has staged its resurgence. The U.S. has plans to send an additional 21,000 U.S. soldiers and Marines to Afghanistan in the coming months. Italy observed a day of mourning for the victims of Monday's powerful earthquake. 205 coffins stood side by side at an open-air state funeral in the central Italian town of L'Aquila. We have a report narrated by Neil Connery of Independent Television News.
The rows of coffins laid out on the parade ground of L'Aquila's police station brought home the true scale of this disaster. Good Friday, a national day of mourning across Italy, as the death toll from the country's worst earthquake in 3 decades climbed to 289. Small white caskets with the bodies of children lay on their parents' coffins, some with a favourite toy placed on top. A message sent from Pope Benedict was read out at the funeral mass. His Holiness said he shared the mourners' anguish. I ask God, he said, to drive away each tear. Italy's Prime Minister, Silvio Berlusconi, joined the mourners. He sparked controversy, saying the quake survivors should look at having to live under canvas as like being on a camping holiday. He's described L'Aquila as a ghost town, but has promised the government will do all it can to help the survivors. Their pain and loss today was clear to see. Italy has been united to remember the victims of the earthquake.
Also today, Italian Prime Minister Berlusconi deployed hundreds of troops and police to prevent looting in the quake zone. At least 4 people have been arrested. Police in Britain expanded a string of terror searches across the country today. 2 days ago, a dozen people were arrested in connection with an alleged terror plot. Nearly all of them are Pakistani nationals who went to Britain on student visas. Those raids were launched earlier than planned after Britain's anti-terrorism chief, Bob Quick, was photographed carrying, so that it was visible, a secret document about the operation. He resigned yesterday. 2 students were killed in an apparent murder-suicide at a community college in Dearborn, Michigan. Police responded to a 911 call that shots were fired at Henry Ford Community College and the campus was in lockdown. Police discovered the bodies of a man and woman in an empty classroom along with a shotgun. A line of severe weather moved across the southern U.S. today with tornado touchdowns in Kentucky and Tennessee. Last night, at least 3 people were killed after a tornado ripped through the mountain community of Mena, Arkansas. Residents started to clean up in the light of day as rescue workers searched what was left of area homes. They found no more dead or injured. Wildfires in Texas and Oklahoma, meanwhile, claimed 2 lives and destroyed more than 100 homes. Yesterday's high winds diminished today, making the flames easier for firefighters to battle. And still to come on the NewsHour tonight, 3 economic stories: where we stand, getting the money back, and hard times for the arts, plus Shields and Lowry. Margaret Warner gets us started.
After months of gloomy economic news and dark forecasts, President Obama pointed to progress today and what he called glimmers of hope. He spoke to reporters after meeting with his economic team in the White House.
We feel very good about the progress that we're making in unlocking lending in some particular markets. We have also seen this month people starting to get their first checks in terms of the tax cuts that were initiated through the recovery package. And when you combine it with the other efforts that are being made across the country for infrastructure projects, for the kinds of innovative energy programs that were part of the recovery package, what you're starting to see is glimmers of hope across the economy.
There was some positive economic news this week, including better than expected retail sales and record profits at one of the nation's largest banks, Wells Fargo. New jobless claims also fell slightly, fueling some hopes that the recession is bottoming out. That helped lead to a fifth straight week of gains on Wall Street. The markets were closed today for Good Friday, but yesterday the Dow Jones Industrial Average surged more than 3%. All in all, stock indexes are up 20% or more in the last 5 weeks. But there's still plenty of data pointing to a prolonged recession. The number of people receiving jobless benefits reached nearly 6 million, and the unemployment rate stands at 8.5%. President Obama said the economy is still under severe stress.
Right now, we're still seeing a lot of job losses, a lot of hardship, people finding themselves in very difficult situations, either because they've lost their home, they've seen their savings deteriorate, and they're still at risk of losing their jobs. So we've still got a lot of work to do.
The president promised additional action in the coming weeks.
And for some perspective on what this week's developments say about the broader economic picture, we're joined by Stephen Pearlstein, a business and economics columnist for The Washington Post, and Nick Perna, managing director of Perna Associates, an economics analysis consulting firm. Welcome, gentlemen, to you both. Nick Perna, beginning with you. What do you make of these conflicting signs we've seen this week?
They're very characteristic of what I call the pre-recovery stage of a business cycle. What we're getting is evidence that if we were all taking calculus, we would call it a point of inflection. In other words, the economy is going from a very accelerating rate of decline to a smaller rate of decline, but it's still declining. And there's conflicting evidence because not everything lines up at this point, but what it's suggesting to us is that the economy should bottom out by the fall of this year, and recovery should start in terms of GDP this year and labor markets next year.
Is that what you see, Steve Pearlstein, that we're in a pre-recovery phase?
I think that's a little optimistic. For one thing, I think the financial sector has still got there's a couple of shoes to drop there, which we can talk about. And then I think we will have a prolonged period in this country of really bouncing along the bottom, even when we hit the bottom, which we have not. I wouldn't expect that ordinary Americans would see the economy as recovering until the end of next year.
And why is that?
Just because when you come out of the biggest credit bubble bursting in the history of the world, with so much excess capacity in almost every industry of the economy, you know, it just takes a long time for companies to shrink, for industries to shrink, for people to go from their old jobs to their new jobs. There's just a very complicated set of transition, and investors are very wary.
So, Nick Perna, though, well, first of all, what's your response to that? And also to what Larry Summers said yesterday, which seems to be more in line with what you're saying, that this sense, he said, of a ball falling off a table or a free fall, that he was fairly confident that within the next few months, that would no longer be the sentiment, or words to that effect.
Yeah, and I think that the consensus of economists, for example, there was a forecast survey that just came out yesterday, I believe, conducted by the Wall Street Journal, and in it, they describe a forecast that's very similar to the one I'm describing. I'm one of the participants, by the way, but we're not saying that this thing is going to be over and that everything's going to be hunky-dory by the end of the year. No, all we're saying is that the GDP should stop falling sometime in the third or fourth quarter, and that jobs will continue to decline for a while, and the unemployment rate will continue to rise as we get into next year. I think as far as investors being very depressed at this point, the comment that was made by Steve, you know, the stock market's up better than 20%. And the thing about the stock market that's important is that it has a history of being a very good indicator of when recessions are going to end. And one of the reasons for that is that it has the uncanny ability to help produce the forecast that it makes, because when the stock market goes up, wealth increases, confidence goes up. So it's no mystery that stock market goes up, economy follows. It's not simply a matter of, you know, kind of biorhythms where this has always happened in the past. No, there's good reason to believe this.
All right, what do you make of first of all, why have the markets gone up 20% in the last 5 weeks? And is Nick Perna right that it builds on itself?
Well, there's no question that there's a self-reinforcing quality to things when they go up and when they go down. So good news begets good news, and it builds on itself. But at the end of the day, in terms of the stock market, for example, if the profits are not there for the companies whose stock has gone up 25%, then the market will correct again. What we're seeing is a pretty common thing. It's called a bear market rally. We have it all the time in bear markets. It tries, there's good news. In this case, the good news is that the banks may not be in as bad shape as everyone thought, and it was the bank stocks that really drove down the averages, and now the bank stocks have really rebounded. We'll see whether, in fact, that's the case. And it's also true what Nick says. Look, the market, if it overshot on the way down, all it may be doing is going up to the point where it's at the bottom, and it's going to stay there for a while. But my guess is that we are going to see some more testing on the downside here. There's going to be some bad news sometime in the next few months.
What?
You know, if I knew, I'd be rich here. You know, I wouldn't be appearing on your program. But I don't. And
I hope you would still.
Nobody really does. But trust me, there's two shoes to drop, and I think they're important ones, and we can talk about them, Nick. One of them is the commercial real estate. We have not seen the full effect of what is probably a 40% decline in the value of office buildings and shopping centers and warehouses. The second thing is that there is a lot of bad corporate credit out there that hasn't defaulted yet, but that even if past averages hold true for this recession, we're going to have a lot of corporate defaults, and that is really going to hurt the financial system again, and you'll see that in the stock market.
Nick, do you agree with that, Nick Perna, that there are still some unrealized losses out there and potential disasters?
Yeah, I think that's an important point. And I think, though, that two perspectives on it. One of them is that some things are starting to get better. And, you know, we've had a pickup in home buying. We've had a little signs that house prices are not falling as rapidly, may even be rising in some parts of the country. So that means that the losses in those segments of the financial sector will be getting smaller. But I think it's important to understand that maybe we're not as far apart. All I'm saying is that we're close to making a bottom, and that the economy should go from declining to rising. I'm not saying that this is going to be the recovery to end all recoveries. You know, it's going to take us years to get back to 14,165 on the Dow, which is where we were in October of 2007. I don't know how many years, but it's certainly not a matter of a couple of months or even a couple of years. It'll probably take a longer time than that.
Finally, but explain, I mean, to most people at home, that they might have a 401k and be mildly cheered here. Unemployment, the fear of unemployment, of someone in their family losing a job, if they haven't already, is paramount. All the polls show this, Steve. Why, I mean, all these forecasts, even the ones that say the recession in terms of GDP should bottom out third quarter of this year, all say it's end of next year before unemployment starts improving. Now, why is there that big a lag?
There just is. It takes you know, people who run businesses are human beings too, and they wait as long as they can to lay people off, and then they have to do it. And then here's the real problem. There's always some people losing jobs in the economy, but there's always people being hired. The problem at the end of a recession is nobody's being hired. And so there's a natural churn, but it's only half of the natural churn. The natural hiring does not go on. People are very reluctant to hire permanently, because when you hire permanently, it's sort of permanent. So you use temporary employees, you use overtime, and it takes a long time. That's why it's a lagging indicator.
And Nick Perna, your thoughts on unemployment? Do you agree there'll be that big a lag?
Yeah, but I think what's really interesting is that this long lag has only followed the last two recessions, which were the mildest on record. If you look back at all the post-war recessions, post-World War II, prior to that, the lags were very short. So the jobless recovery is a phenomenon of the early 1990s and the early 2000s. And, you know, it could be that we'll be surprised that after a very deep recession, we might come back sooner. I'm not forecasting that. I'm forecasting that there will be a lag. But this is something that's more new than borne about by all the history of recessions.
We are out of time, but go ahead. Quick
The
final
reason
thought.
in the 90s recoveries were jobless is because they came out of recessions that were caused by bursting of asset bubbles, real estate bubbles, stock market bubbles, and that's the characteristic. Those were not the characteristics of the 1950s and 60s recessions, which were a result of what the economists called inventory swings.
All right, we have to leave it there on inventory swings. Steve Pearlstein, Nick Berna, thank you both.
Fine.
And a second take on the economy, a look at the growing calls to take back some of the money paid to corporate executives in high salaries and bonuses. Economics correspondent Paul Salman has our report.
Wall Street, for years proud bastion of American economic might and expertise, now a symbol of pay for non-performance, with us taxpayers picking up the tab. Can we get any of the money back, so-called clawbacks? Can we reform the system? First stop on our quest for answers, the AIG office in Connecticut that tanked the firm. The day after, news broke of millions in bonuses here. Those working in the same building didn't know whether to laugh or cry.
Good fodder for jokes for us, because being downstairs from them.
What's the best AIG?
We see the money floating down outside their windows.
I've kind of blocked it out mentally, just from a morale standpoint. I think the human spirit can only take so much.
What's so demoralizing? Personal gain, public loss, to the tune of billions at AIG alone. But AIG is just one of many, says lawyer Dan Pedrati, head of the AFL-CIO's Office of Investment.
The top 5 investment banks in the 5 years leading up to the current crisis awarded $145 billion. Billion dollars in bonuses. And this is larger than the GDP of countries like, Pakistan and Egypt.
Even normally two-handed economists have lost the use of their other hand.
It was because of the compensation and the bonuses on Wall Street that executives did reckless things which destroyed the value of the companies. That's why most of us have 201ks when we used to have 401ks.
Peter Marisi is at the University of Maryland. Richard Freeman, Harvard.
Says the only thing that matters in these people's lives is pure, unadulterated greed.
But this is one of the fundamentals of economics. Incentives matter.
Yes, exactly. But there's also, we didn't realize there was huge incentives to cheat and to misreport things. And that's what seems to have occurred.
Even American Bankers Association CEO Edward Yingling doesn't dispute this argument.
There is broad agreement within the financial sector that the compensation policies have been misaligned, would be the word.
Okay, but then is there any way to get back the misaligned compensation? That's what we wanted to ask the folks at AIG, whose ever-climbing losses, mostly due to credit default insurance it sold from here, we taxpayers are now making good on.
Hi, this is Paul Salman from the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer.
AIG lost $99 billion last year, dwarfing total profits over the past decade. Now, not everyone in this unit was implicated, and the real culprits have mostly disappeared, it said.
Hello? Hello?
But it wasn't being said to us, even though we'd called ahead for an interview.
There's nothing that we can tell you in terms of who you can talk to.
Though we didn't know it, the folks behind the door were already receiving death threats. Comedian Bill Maher had even joked about capital punishment.
If we killed 2 random rich, greedy pigs, I mean killed, like blew them up at halftime at next year's Super Bowl, or left them hanging on the big board at the New York Stock Exchange.
I think it's an egregious wrong for people to now get multiple million-dollar bonuses for failed performance.
With Wall Street critic New York Attorney General Andrew Cuomo threatening to name the AIG bonus recipients, I guess I wouldn't talk to a TV crew either.
So we're going to have to ask you guys to leave.
Okay.
AIG, of course, isn't the only target of the clamor for clawbacks. While giving a speech in Washington, D.C. this week addressing government bailouts at Wall Street, Goldman Sachs CEO Lloyd Blankfein was blindsided by a pair of silent protesters who presented him with a graphic appeal, "We want our money back."
Everybody have that now?
Blankfein, who earned more than $40 million last year, did not offer restitution. Steve Waters was for years an investment banker with Goldman's chief rival, Morgan Stanley. He left in 1991 to found his own global firm, Compass Advisors. Does he think we'll get the money back?
I think probably the only way that'll happen is that there will have to be a big judicial mess, right? My guess is you'd spend a lot of effort and probably get modest amounts back, because people will say, well, I already spent it or whatever I did, so the ability to get it back is probably limited.
But the AFL-CIO's Dan Pedrati takes a more sanguine view.
If we have the outcry from the American people that, you know, we should recoup this money that was essentially stolen, then we'll find a way to do it.
The House recently passed a bill taxing current financial pay above $250,000 at 90% for those at firms getting bailouts, though it's now stalled in the Senate. The idea made Richard Freeman a bit hopeful about the future.
People will pay it, or else what are they going to do?
Can we get the money back from executives, do you suppose, that they took on the basis of what now appears to be a great charade with respect to both earnings and profits?
I doubt it, to be honest. But the problem is with the contracts in the very first place. We've got to change the way people are paid, making fees off transactions when, in fact, if the transaction goes bad, their fee money is still paid.
So far, the only tactic that seems to be working is shame. 15 of the top 20 bonus recipients at AIG's financial products unit have agreed to return the money, including those visited on the recent Lifestyles of the Rich and Infamous bus tour.
Well, this is one of the AIG execs that received the bonus, and I've heard that he's returning that bonus, and we came here to thank him for it.
And though the protesters at the D.C. conference were prevented from taking the podium and proved a source of considerable discomfort, Lloyd Blankfein seemed to feel it best to sympathize with their outrage.
I think that reflects a prevailing view in the world, and if it's not articulated well, and if it's not articulated in a manner that's considerate of the people here, it's nevertheless real and visceral and felt by most people in the country, maybe everybody in the country, and I don't exclude myself from that.
But beyond the public pressure on Goldman, AIG, lies a key question. Is regulation of Wall Street pay likely to succeed? Bank lobbyist Edward Yingling says the industry will regulate itself.
The industry is working on new policies that would align compensation with success long term. And I think there's a consensus building that that's the way to go. The compensation policies have gotten out of whack.
But Richard Freeman says we can't leave it up to the industry.
You want to have strong regulations. You want to have huge penalties if they found to commit financial crimes. And then you want to build it up so these guys don't even think of this kind of stuff.
But how are you going to write the regulations in ways that Wall Street, with its enormous incentives and savvy, won't figure out a way around?
Wall Street is 25% finance and 75% legal maneuvering. They approach financial regulation the way most people approach the IRS regarding their taxes.
And they're good at it.
And they have the money to pay for the very best lawyers, and they have been abusing the American people in the process.
So Wall Street's Waters has his own proposal. Pay the top regulators substantial salaries to make it a fair fight.
Regulation is not a glamorous career, doesn't pay well. You could probably say, the smart folks will go to Wall Street and figure out how to beat the SEC as opposed to go to the SEC and figure out how to control Wall Street, right? Ultimately, what we lost was the integrity of the markets. And to restore that integrity of the markets, you ought to be willing to pay something for that.
Because if not, how will the Obama administration recruit the best and savviest to write and enforce the pay rules and tough regulations it has promised? All in the interest of restoring a measure of integrity on Wall Street.
And the analysis of Shields and Lowry, that's syndicated columnist Mark Shields and National Review editor Rich Lowry. David Brooks is off. Gentlemen, it's good to see you both.
Good to see you, Judy.
Mark, we just watched that report from Paul Solomon. Is there a mood in Washington? Is there the will to do something about this, this extra money that these executives got?
I think that the move by executives on Wall Street to address the compensation problem and to say, wait a minute, we were overpaid, is an anticipation in hoping to head off congressional action. I think there's certainly a will in the country. There's a ferment in the country anyway, whether that translates into a will, but about the outlandish salaries and the disproportionate wealth that was concentrated in the financial sector.
Can the financial community head this off?
Well, we'll see. I mean, one of the ironies here is actually the Obama administration is looking for ways around the compensation restrictions that were passed by Congress already that are supposed to go along with TARP funds. And there's just a tension here because the government, on the one hand, it wants firms to take this money because it thinks it's helpful to the broader economy. On the other hand, you don't want to be funding what is perceived as excess. And this is just another reason why TARP, I think justly, has become such an object of populist rage both on the right and on the left. It was sold under false pretenses and almost immediately just became a slush fund for the executive to use in whatever manner it desired.
Let me ask you another kind of...
I agree. I agree with that. No, I think there's minimal public support for TARP.
We heard Margaret talking earlier with two guests about where the economy is, Mark. The president today talking about glimmers of hope out there. Yesterday he was encouraging homeowners to refinance their mortgages. The rates are low. Can this kind of jawboning help?
Well, I think it helps to the extent that optimism helps anytime economic activity when people are more confident about the future. But he was quite measured, was the president. There was no nuance. There was no mission accomplished banners. There was no announcement that, as Senator McCain made fatally during the month of September, that the fundamentals of the economy are sound and strong in a week that probably doomed his campaign. So I think that the president is walking a very sort of thin line. He's trying to encourage people, give them a sense of optimism, but no way proclaiming victory.
Maybe jawboning is too strong a word.
Yeah, well, this isn't anything new, though. The president's rhetorical tone shifted almost immediately after the stimulus passed because they wanted to augment the sense of crisis to get that thing through. And I'm not a big fan of the line of argument the president can talk up or talk down the economy much. I think it has to do with fundamental conditions in the economy. And what Obama's more optimistic take has going for it is now there's some signs of, I think Larry Summers used the word green sprouts in the economy. Car sales are a little bit up. There's some signs of consumer demand coming back a little bit. So it may be that Milton Friedman's analogy talked about the economy being a plucked string. If you pull it down quickly enough, it's going to bounce back. And perhaps that's happening now. The big question mark is just how big a hole the banks still have in their balance sheets.
I do think that history would record, though, that both Franklin Roosevelt and Ronald Reagan did inspire a sense of optimism and confidence in the country at a time of dire economic straits, certainly more serious in the Roosevelt era.
A few other things happened this week I want to ask you both about. Rich, Defense Secretary Robert Gates rolled out the Gates budget for the Pentagon this week. We don't know the final numbers, but we know he's trying to do away with some major weapons programs, instituting some new ones. How much success is he likely to have?
Well, the history of this, when you go after these weapon systems that might not make so much sense, piecemeal, it gets shot down in Congress. So they're hoping in a broader push, more of it will get through. My problem with the vision here, I think Gates is extremely responsible public servant, and within the constraints he's under, I think the choices he's making make sense. I'm not sure the constraints make sense in the context of defense budgets in the recent past, and certainly in the context of the rest of what the federal government doing. This is an austerity budget at a time we're still in Iraq, at a time we're escalating in Afghanistan, and are probably going to do so for years to come. I think it's a mistake to be squeezing.
You think he's cutting too much?
I do.
I don't. And we just had the Government Accountability Office this week report 47 weapon systems, $296 billion in cost overruns. I mean, to think that there isn't trimming to be done here. And Secretary Gates demonstrated, I thought, superbly in his interview on the show with you this week, is the perfect person to do this. I mean, just think of the advantage he brings to it. He not only was President George Bush's Secretary of Defense, having served in all these different administrations, he's got enormous respect. He's got enormous trust. He's not seen as a partisan on either side of the aisle. And a new secretary trying to do this, Judy, would be almost impossible. He wouldn't have the relations with Congress. He's trusted. He's admired. I think he makes a strong case. And it's based on a predicate, which is the war that we're fighting is not the war of big weapons. It's not going to be a World War II war. It's a counterinsurgency war, and that's why the weapon systems that he's recommending, I think, do make sense.
I agree with that, and this is much preferable to the Rumsfeld approach, which was to ignore the current war in pursuit of some vision of transformation. I think the risk, though, is future wars may not be wars of counterinsurgency. You can imagine, as they call it in the jargon, a peer competitor rising up in the form of China, which is pursuing a very aggressive military modernization. You have the threat of ballistic missiles coming on. So I would really prefer to do both.
We spend more on defense than the next 48 countries in the world combined. We are not starving the Pentagon.
Very different subject. Developments in 3 different geographic jurisdictions, the state of Iowa, the state of Vermont, and here in the district near us in the District of Columbia, same-sex marriage approved or pushed in that direction. Rich, is this something, what does this tell us about where the country is on this
Well,
issue?
what's so momentous about Vermont, this is the first time it's been entirely a small d democratic process through which advocates of gay marriage have actually instituted gay marriage. So I think what we're going to see is a patchwork approach. And in those states, like in Iowa, where you can have the judiciary impose gay marriage, and it's very hard to go to the public for a constitutional amendment to overturn it, you're going to see gay marriage in a state like that. In the more socially liberal states, Vermont, perhaps New Hampshire will be coming online, Massachusetts we already have, you'll have gay marriage. But in the states where it's very easy for the public to vote directly on the question in these state constitutional amendments, you're not going to see gay marriage. And so far that's been 30 states. So this is going to be long, drawn out, trench warfare politically and legally.
Still, it's progress for those who support.
There's no question that we're seeing a sea change in attitudes in the country just over the last generation, Judy. I mean, just a majority, barely 25 years ago, a 2-to-1 majority of people in America thought gay and homosexual teachers should not be allowed to teach. I mean, that school boards could fire them at will. This is really a sea change, and where it is, you can see it is chronologically. The younger voters are more accepting, more tolerant, more welcoming of same-sex marriage. Older voters are more resistant. Rich is right. That one state did pass it. Arizona passed it in a referendum in 2006, and then overturned it in 2008. But the reality is that the tide is moving in the direction of same-sex. And what stops the opposition is there's no prominent figure of political power, of visibility in Washington to lead the fight against it. I mean, there's no Tom DeLay in office. There's no Bill Frist in the Senate even. I mean, nobody seems to have the appetite to make this an issue, because at a time when the economy is as bad as it is and in crisis, the economy becomes the only issue, and the others become almost diversions.
Agree with that?
Well, I don't know. I don't see a huge tide sweeping the country. I mean, we just remember in November, California passed a constitutional amendment banning gay marriage, a state where you have LA and San Francisco and Silicon Valley. So, as I say, it's going to be a patchwork. And that's what we're going to live with for a while.
Something else I want to ask both of you about. We've seen a spate of mass shootings over the last week or so. Binghamton, New York, but then there have been several others, almost been every single day.
Alabama.
Are we going to see any change, Rich, in gun laws, gun control as a result of this?
I don't think you'll see anything major. I just think the politics of this issue so fundamentally shifted over the last 5, 7, 10 years, where Democrats decided gun control was a loser. And the foremost example of that is Barack Obama, pretty liberal guy, Democratic nominee, Democratic president, endorsing basically an individual right to bear arms under the Constitution. And I think also as a policy matter, it's hard to see what specific change you could make that would prevent these sort of events short of banning and confiscating all guns, which is obviously implausible.
Well, I do think there's been a change. I think Rich is absolutely right there. But Judy, I mean, we did in 1994 in this country, the Clinton administration, Congress, vote to ban 19 types of assault weapons, automatic weapons, ones that Barry Goldwater had said there was absolutely no reason, no justification for that even being produced. They are not used for hunting. Take in the District of Columbia, I'm sorry, are we running? No, but my point is that President Obama is on record clearly and unequivocally saying he favors a permanent ban on assault weapons. That assault weapon ban was seen by Democrats in 1994 for the reason, one of the reasons they lost the Congress. And Rich is right. There is a timidity as far as the National Rifle Association. Guns don't kill people. Peanut butter does. I mean, that's their argument at this point. I mean, the whole thing is a case of this town needs a vertebrae transplant. It needs spine and it needs nerve on this issue. The Republicans seek their approbation. Democrats want to avoid their wrath. And it's that simple.
Tough subject. We thank you both.
Thank you.
Mark Shields, Rich Lowry.
Thanks, Judy.
Appreciate it. Finally tonight, the arts world struggling to stay afloat in the economic downturn. Jeffrey Brown reports from Dayton, Ohio.
At the Victoria Theater downtown recently, the Dayton Ballet presented its final performances of the season, facing an uncertain future.
Is the survival of the company at stake?
If the free fall doesn't stop, I think we're in jeopardy, yes.
Coupe behind, touch, and.
Dermot Burke has led this company for 17 years. Founded in 1927, it's the second oldest ballet company in the U.S. and a source of pride in this Midwest city. But in the economic downturn, it's in trouble. It's cutting administrative staff, the number of dancers, and shortening its season.
Call home.
Things were already bad, Burke says. Then they went off a cliff when the big three automakers, including GM, came to Washington in November to seek a bailout.
We know the day that it happened. It was the day, literally the day.
Our industry, which represents America's real economy, Main Street, needs a bridge to span the financial chasm that is open before us.
This is a car town. It's a GM town. And it's not just the people that work at the plant, the suppliers as well. And people just stop buying tickets. They just simply stop buying tickets.
The ticket losses came at the worst possible time, during the company's production of the Nutcracker, a family favorite that usually brings in some 40 to 50% of earned income for the entire year. At the same time, the ballet was losing much of its rainy day fund in the markets, and philanthropic support slowed. Drastic measures were required.
You yourself took a very large salary cut, 50%.
That's true. Yes, I did. I couldn't ask people to take the hit they were going to take if I didn't take a hit. And the hit that I took had to be significant. The closeness of this organization is what makes this week tough.
Dayton has long been a home to innovation, inventors. The Wright brothers built their first planes here, and corporate powerhouses. The nearby Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is a major engine of jobs and technology for the area, and there are some signs of new growth from tech startups. But like other traditional manufacturing centers, this is a city in economic distress, and key employers have cut back, folded, or left town. The parking lot at the GM plant, which closed in December, was virtually empty. The lot at the nearby Job Center, the largest of its kind in the U.S., was packed. Unemployment for the region is now more than 11%, and Dayton hasn't posted a positive gain in job growth in 8 years, the longest streak of any U.S. city. But this is also a place that takes enormous pride in its cultural life, an unusually vibrant one for a city of its size. Among its gems, the Dayton Art Institute, the Schuster Center, home to the Dayton Opera and Dayton Philharmonic.
What do you do when you're not sure?
The Human Race Theater Company, an active community of visual artists, and DCDC, the Dayton Contemporary Dance Company, founded in 1968 and today nationally known for its African-American repertory. Here, too, the dancers are facing a shorter season and a drop in income, taking on outside work, and considering the future.
I have a house and a husband, and you know, between mortgages and all the sorts of bills that we have, you know, we have to be realistic and know that, unfortunately, bills have to be paid. 1, 2, 3.
To help the dancers and bring in new funds, DCDC is developing partnerships with the city schools and the University of Dayton, among other steps. The company continues to reach out to foundations, corporations, and individuals, the lifeblood of nonprofits. Executive Director Ronita Haas-Saunders, a native Daytonian whose father worked for GM, makes that pitch often.
When I am talking about who we are and what it is that you are contributing to, I am talking about a world-class organization that has been around for 40 years, that has a proven track record, that can truly deliver, and that is going to spend your money wisely, because we have always had to be very conservative in the way that we operated our business.
Of course, even more than usual, all kinds of groups are now making similar and sometimes dire pleas for support. Mike Parks is president of the Dayton Foundation, representing some 3,000 individuals, families, and others in the city's philanthropic community. And he's acutely aware of the growing need.
In our community right now, in our 5-county area around Dayton, we have over 4,000 nonprofits, 4,000. Nationally, we now have over 1.6 million nonprofits. So we have the number of nonprofits going up at a time when each of those nonprofits are struggling for funding. There's a recent study that said in the next 24 months, up to 10% of the nonprofits nationally may not be here.
Parks recently called an emergency meeting of local nonprofits to discuss ideas that could help them survive. Funders, he says, are balancing these needs, and some areas, including the arts, may suffer.
I've gotten a number of calls from individuals that have advised funds, donor-advised funds, where the family makes decisions and they say, I see the hurt in our community. My neighbor has been laid off. My nephew has been affected. I see the lines for basic human needs such as food and housing and the demands on the local services. And they say, I want to help. They may dig deeper, but in many cases they're making a decision, a tough decision, to shift their priorities.
We happened on a vivid example of this conflict at a nearby St. Vincent de Paul community store, which gets its funding from foundations and individuals, and was literally in the process of expanding its food bank to respond to the growing number of families new to poverty. Terry Williamson, a development programs manager for St. Vincent, formerly raised money for arts groups.
The money needs to go to that pallet of peanut butter before it goes to supporting that artistic experience. You know, my heart is in the arts, but you've got to understand that it's a complete picture, and it's very difficult in scary times to look at a complete picture when the food's not there.
In fact, everyone in the arts world we spoke to understood this very well. They also know they can't expect much help these days from local government. Montgomery County, where Dayton is located, has given $1 million a year to local arts organizations. Commissioner Dan Foley told us that with sales tax revenues flat for so long, that will be hard to maintain. But at the same time, he says, the region can't afford to lose the arts if it's to attract new businesses and turn around its economy.
I give a few speeches every week, and a lot of times I talk about the strengths of the community, and I talk about the fact that we have affordable housing here. I talk about the fact that we have the Air Force Base. I talk about the fact that we have a history of innovation. Every time I list those strengths, I talk about arts and culture. And that's a strength we don't have to manufacture. I mean, it's here.
Denise Regg, who is head of a group called Culture Works, is one of the city's strongest arts advocates, puts it this way.
I often like to tell people, you know, the Dayton Art Institute, which is a bastion of culture in this region, was built in 1930. how many people must have thought that was crazy? But how much more people must have thought it was crazy in 1933 when the Dayton Philharmonic began? So when you look now back over 75 years and all they've brought to our community and the great city that Dayton became, you know, the arts are to some degree an investment in not the here and now necessarily, but the future of who and what will be.
It may be a tough argument for many just now, but tenacious artists and supporters in Dayton are hoping that history is on their side.
Again, the major developments of the day, standoffs with Somali pirates continued off the east coast of Africa. The remaining American hostage, Captain Richard Phillips, was recaptured after an unsuccessful attempt to escape. And in Iraq, 5 American soldiers were killed in the deadliest single attack in more than a year on U.S. forces. And a reminder, you can find us online at our new one-stop address, newshour.pbs.org. Tonight, you can hear more from Jeffrey Gettleman on the pirate standoff in East Africa. On the business desk, see how much CEOs made and watch a protest against big bonuses. And on our Art Beat page, listen to an interview with Elie Wiesel about his new book, A Mad Desire to Dance. Remember, the NewsHour is available whenever you want it at newshour.pbs.org. Washington Week can be seen later this evening on most PBS stations. We'll see you online and again here Monday evening. Have a great weekend. I'm Judy Woodruff. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by Chevron, Intel, supporting math and science education for tomorrow's innovators, and by Grant Thornton.
The William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, working to solve social and environmental problems at home and around the world.
And with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
this program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
To know, Toyota quality saves money. And now you can save on the famously fuel-efficient Toyota Prius. Get up to $3,200 in extra value package savings, plus your choice of $750 cash back or 0% APR financing. But hurry, these offers end soon. Toyota, a smart way to keep moving forward.
The best brands, the most popular models in home entertainment, they're here now at Home Video Library Electronics. Find Sony Bravia with advanced digital HD processing to create outstanding high-definition viewing.
If you shop around, you'll be glad you found Home Video Library Electronics.
It's time to go to LKQ U-Pull-It for surprising savings on all parts for cars and trucks. For what you pay for an alternator at a retail store, you can get a wheelbarrow full of parts at LKQ U-Pull-It.
LKQ U-Pull-It. The parts you need, the prices you like.
Did you know that wall and ceiling cracks can be an early sign of foundation problems? Did you know that your damp basement or crawl space can cause serious mold and allergy problems for you and your family, as well as increasing the cost to heat your home? Did you know that Terra Firma can provide solutions to all these problems? Call now for a free inspection by your local experts. You're on solid ground with Terra Firma. Price guaranteed, work guaranteed. Call Terra Firma, 452-4049.
Where is Broadway Toyota? You probably guessed that it's on Broadway, but where? Let me show you. Here's the Broadway Bridge, and here is Broadway Toyota. Here's the Oregon Convention Center, and over here is Broadway Toyota. Here's the Rose Garden, and just off the Rose Garden exit, 1 block east, is Broadway Toyota at the Rose Quarter. Minutes from downtown and in the heart of the city, Broadway is the only way.
New